Hi, and welcome to my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV, or social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. So here today we have Lyn Smith, and we are going to talk about her journey to healing and taking responsibility in the process. Hi, Lyn.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you very much for having me on.
No worries at all. Thank you for coming on. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my story actually, Sophie, is a very harrowing one. I got into doing what I'm doing now because I literally went through very traumatic experiences. And so if you're listening to this, you might need to mute it if there's young ears in the room a little bit for a couple of minutes, because my story is that I was raped in my teens, and that happened to me twice with different guys, and that obviously had a very massive impact on me in terms of how I then viewed and behaved in future relationships. So
The thing as well, with being formative years as well, it's hard, isn't it?
very
I mean, it's
hard.
hard at any time, but what I mean is that at 15, it is going to completely change the view that you have of yourself, of men, of everything.
Massively did. And literally, at the age of 18, after the second time, I was ready to check out, to be honest
Mm.
with you. I went through such a dark period in my thoughts and feelings, and just general experience of having horrible um, feelings of shame, humiliation. You beat yourself up around these things, even though it's the perpetrators that are at fault. That I was going to take my own life,
Mhm.
literally, and I had the means to do it because at the time I was working as a veterinary nurse. I lived above the surgery with another nurse. We shared the apartment upstairs, and literally, had the keys to the poisons cabinet and knew which drug would kill me. And I got as far as literally opening that door and getting that drug out and looking at it.
Mhm.
And then I think at the time, the only thing that stopped me was the thought of my younger brother being without his sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so from that point, how did you, I want to say, climb back up sort of thing? I know because we've talked about it, it doesn't happen straight away, but where did you go from there, from that place?
Yeah, I mean, I still, I suppose, led a bit of a destructive life. I mean, I literally went through, put my hands up, and I think a lot of girls do this, a promiscuous phase. I think a lot of women, especially girls, um, look for love through sex if we've not
Hmm.
got a high opinion of ourselves, and we're not necessarily conscious that we don't have a high opinion of ourselves, because a lot of us are very intelligent women, but there is that self-destruct button, if you've been, especially if you've been through trauma, or you've had, I didn't have a very um, functional family life either. My mum and dad had a very volatile relationship. So it literally was, um, a phase of my life where I was looking for love in all the wrong places. And I literally went through that
It's about being
phase,
wanted, isn't it?
yeah, of being promiscuous, and then attracting, within that some good relationships and some toxic relationships, but always managing to self-sabotage them either way on the back of not having that self-worth.
Mm. So, what changed? What made you kind of start that journey of healing, of self-awareness, of understanding? How did that come about?
I think it started literally, I mean, it took me to about my mid-20s to sort of attract my now ex-husband, who was a very good man, I have to say. He was a great guy. So I think at that point in my life, I'd had I'd had the time to sort of get it out of my system that
Mhm.
I was worthy of more and better, because as I say, I did attract my husband as a great guy, but within that relationship, I still got issues because my heart was closed.
Yeah.
I'd got the padlocks, the chains,
Yeah.
and all the rest of it, the armor.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because there's one side of you that really wants to be wanted and loved and everything, and the other side is like, oh, I'm not letting you in.
Exactly. And so I went in that relationship, and although I loved my husband, there wasn't great passion in that relationship. And I realized, that I contributed to that. Although that's what I wanted from a relationship, I wanted to feel loved and I wanted to experience passion and fulfillment and feel alive. The reason I didn't experience that, and I know that now because I've done work on myself and I've become more aware, but within that relationship, I didn't know that what I know now, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that I was defaulting into masculine energy. And quite often, as women, if we've been through hurt, if we've been through trauma, we default into masculine energy because we all have masculine and feminine energy,
I was going to
regardless of
say,
gender.
it sounds quite obvious what it is, but do you want to explain it, what masculine and feminine energies are, instead, in case someone doesn't know?
Right. Okay. So, regardless of our gender, we all have masculine and feminine energy. It's just that usually our main core energy is one or the other. And usually in heterosexual relationships, it's the same as our gender. Not always the case, but usually in heterosexual relationships, if you're a woman, then your natural core energy, in other words, the strongest element and energy within you is the feminine energy. But we have both, regardless of whether you're male or female, and regardless of our sexual orientation. And for women, when we default into masculine energy, it's usually on the back of previous hurts or trauma, or it's because we need to be more assertive in the workplace. We take on more masculine traits. And we've been educated and parented, haven't we, to be more masculine, because as we've become more independent and on the back of, I suppose, things like the feminist movement and also equal opportunities movement, we've been taught to be more in our masculine energy without realizing it can have a negative impact on our future relationships.
Which
Because
is quite interesting, isn't it? Because if you really look at it, women are becoming more masculine if you look over the last 20 years, and men are becoming more feminine. I mean, 20 years ago, if you said to a bloke, use some moisturizer, he would have laughed you out of the room. Now there's
absolutely,
like ranges for blokes. It seems a little thing, but it highlights how much change there has been.
absolutely, and it doesn't mean that guys who use moisturizer are necessarily not necessarily in the
No,
feminine
but
energy, but
just as
like
an
you say,
example.
yeah, it's just a good example. And I think unfortunately, with on the back of there being a bigger misunderstanding about what equal opportunities actually means, because equal
Mhm.
opportunities means, equal pay, equal opportunities, equal access for all genders. It doesn't mean being the same as.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of women have took it to be we need to be like men, and we don't. That's not where our power lies, certainly not in intimate relationships.
Well, no.
So, women have been used to behaving more like men and then wondering why they're attracting either more feminine men who they're not necessarily that attracted to in terms of relationships, or they're attracting men that you're having conflict with. And that's because we don't even realize that, because we're showing up in masculine energy in our relationship, that the man actually feels there's another masculine energy in the room, and
Mm.
therefore there's like those stags locking horns, and there's conflict that ensues because he can sense there's another masculine energy in the room, and he might even be aware of this stuff that I'm talking about how the energies work in the dynamics of a relationship, but he can just feel it, that you're wearing the trousers basically.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah.
the one that's the masculine, if you like, that is in the relationship. And so to create aliveness and fulfillment in our relationships, we need that polarity. So unless we have polarity in our relationships, in other words, unless one person is strongly in their feminine and the other person is strongly in their masculine, regardless of your sexual orientation, you're not going to have passion.
Mm.
You're not going to have aliveness in your relationship. What you're going to have is either your man, as I say, stepping more into his feminine, or there's going to be conflict, or there's just going to be that neutral energy, which we're again being more educated to be, whereby there is no passion, and you might as well just have a good friendship, because the energy of polarity isn't there, and therefore the relationship is basically flatlining, I call it. There's no pulse.
As you realised that, what did you do next, sort of thing?
It took me to actually end that relationship. I was in that relationship with my ex-husband for 23 years, and it's because I felt safe. I felt protected, and that's all I needed after the trauma of what I went through in my teens in my intimate relationship. That was enough. But there come a time, especially when I've got two daughters, and especially when they were going through puberty, that I realized I really needed to go on that self-help journey and heal stuff, because I wanted to be able to tell them, as well as my husband, that what had happened to me, and I hadn't said anything to anybody. And it took me till the age of 42, in fact, before I had that conversation with anybody. During that time, I still hadn't properly had full awareness of what I know now, and on the back of searching, I suppose, for passion and fulfillment in a relationship, I had the conversation and said, I felt like the relationship had run its course. I didn't want to go and cheat on him. He's a lovely guy. We had a great, happy-ish relationship, but it got to the point where, I felt that we both needed and deserved more, and I didn't know how to change things at that point in my life. And so it wasn't until after I left that relationship and met another long-term partner who I was with for 10 plus years, and now that relationship has run its course. But that I actually found that fulfillment and that love and that passion in a relationship, because I'd actually realized how I could use my feminine energy and educated myself around relationships more to attract that and open my heart to receive that, rather than wanting to protect it, because you're never going to have passion if you want to keep protecting your heart.
But most people, let's be realistic, probably 99% of the population by mid-20s will have known heartache.
Yes.
And whether it's when you're very young, like, first love, teenager, puppy crush type thing, or whether it's someone you were married to in your early 20s, whatever, it hurts. And so many people, as a result, want to protect themselves, and quite rightly so, but not realizing exactly what you just said, that if they don't open the heart to hurt and take the chance, they'll never feel that again.
No, you won't. You'll just have a friendship, or a volatile relationship, and not wonder why. And it's probably because you're still strongly in a masculine energy state without even realizing that you are. And there is times where we need to be, let's face it, if we are feeling threatened, we need to step into that masculine energy to protect ourselves. If we're in a competitive environment, in other words, if we're an athlete or in some sort of sport that we're excelling in, quite often we need to be in masculine energy, because the masculine energy is competitiveness, whereas the feminine is collaboration. So, masculine energy can be very useful, and even in the workplace, obviously, especially if it's a male dominant environment, you might want to, assert yourself by being more in a masculine energy. But when it's not useful is in our private lives, where we need to basically give him his balls back and take the trousers off.
Yeah. But it is true that, some men do feel like emasculated, literally.
Yes.
By their wife or whatever.
Absolutely. I reckon, looking back, I did emasculate my ex-husband, a few times, where I was the wanting to be in control. And at that time, I didn't understand why these dynamics were playing out, because I hadn't got the awareness then.
So would you say that by starting the personal development journey, that was you starting to take responsibility?
Yeah, I thought we were taking responsibility for wanting to be in control, and the feminine is all about relinquishing control, and using your intuition and receiving.
Yeah.
If we have been through trauma, that, as I say, is something we naturally default into quite a lot of the times, is is our masculine energy without realizing that we're doing it, and then wondering why we're not attracting healthy relationships or passionate relationships.
So many people want control. It's untrue. And to be fair, that was me a few years ago as well. But the way we try and control outcomes and manipulate our way around, and then it doesn't work, because sometimes something does not work because it's not supposed to, and you trying to control it actually makes it worse, actually.
Absolutely, because men can feel energetically the weight of a woman's expectations. So if you're wanting to control him or change him, he'll feel that, and then you'll wonder why, he wants to create space and pulls away, and it's because he's energetically feeling that you're controlling, for want of a better word. And whereas if we give men the space that they want, they actually then do want to spend more time with us because they're not feeling the pressure or the expectation. So it can feel quite counterintuitive.
Yeah, but that's interesting because, as you're saying that, it just brings back a few examples in my head. And I would say that some men have that behaviour a lot too.
Yeah.
Where they suffocate their partner by wanting that reassurance all the time, basically.
Yeah, and that is a feminine energy trait, being needy, being in the victim mindset. That is the unhealthy feminine, because there's 5 different energies that I teach around, that I've made a specific model around, and there's the healthy feminine, there's the unhealthy feminine, there's the healthy masculine, there's the unhealthy masculine, but there's also that bit in the middle where you've got that neutral energy where you're neither one or the other. You're very much in the middle neutral ground where you've got that strong friendship more than a passion for each other, because you can have lots of passion for each other in a very toxic relationship, but then your energy state is where you're coming to that relationship from a place of fear, rather than that space and place of love and abundance and faith and trust. You're in that fear, and you're in that, if usually in that toxic feminine is the the victim mentality, where you're very unhealthily submissive and subservient and needy and desperate. And the unhealthy masculine energy is usually the possessive, controlling, jealous, aggressive energy. But there is passion, because you have got that polarity.
Yeah.
The toxic passion.
Again, as you're talking, I'm just thinking, and I personally feel that when people start dating, it is a bit toxic in most of the cases, because they're so infatuated that, first of all, they see what they want to see. But I recall a conversation with someone, and she was literally like, she'd been seeing the guy 3 weeks, and she was just like, oh, I've got to be with him. I've got to be with him. And she wasn't enjoying getting to know him because she was so much in the future that it had to happen. Anyway, I then didn't see her for 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know, and I bumped into her somewhere. And she was then like, oh, no, I finished with him. He won for me. And I'm like, you could be a different person from 3 weeks ago. But it was because all the hormones and everything else was so up in the air. So there was all that needy behaviour. And to be fair, he was kind of like half moved into a flat within 2 weeks anyway. So he was just as needy. And I was like, you need to miss each other. I mean, what are you doing, sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can swap roles within that. Like you say, that he can be just as needy and she can be probably just as possessive. And you can swap, the energies can swap around like you say, quite often in relationships, as to who's the one that's the more controlling, possessive and jealous, and who's the one that's the needy, desperate and submissive. But as I say, you can apply that polarity to toxic relationships, but it's not healthy. But obviously what we do want to educate people around is there is a way to attract healthy polarity in our relationships by having your man in the relationship, if his more dominant energy is the masculine energy, displaying those healthy masculine traits rather than the unhealthy ones, and you, the feminine, displaying, if that is your more core dominant energy, the more healthy feminine traits, and then you've got the healthy passion, that isn't toxic at all. It's where you are feeling alive and everything's, literally how you'd want a fairy tale
Mhm.
relationship to be.
And I would say that one of the ways to get to that is facing up to stuff, because so many people do not, when they experience something that they don't like, as you say, they're going to blame. And what I found is that they just hide all the bad stuff that's happened to them in that great big chest, and they padlock it away, and then it seeps out and they don't like it, and they don't want to know, they don't want to face up to it, they don't want it because it hurts. But unless they look at the past, look at the trauma, look at everything. I mean, there is a bank that is making an advert at the moment, and I think the slogan is "Tomorrow start today," and it's true, But there's loads of todays in the past, and if they've not been dealt with, tomorrow is not going to be what you want it to be.
No, 100%, absolutely. It is about looking at how we contribute to, what we've created in terms of our relationships experiences, because even if you feel like you've been the victim on the end of some toxic behavior from a previous partner, in some way you've contributed to that, because we teach people how to treat us. So you've either contributed to that by accepting unacceptable behavior, you've not had strong boundaries in place, you've even contributed to it by staying in that relationship.
Yeah.
So, it's understanding that we all have our own part to play, even if you have been the victim of the domestic violence or abuse, that, for some reason you've attracted that. And it's usually down to, past unhealed relationships, whether that's relationships with our parents or, past trauma that's caused that lack of self-worth and lack of boundaries to possibly be in place, that's allowed you then to attract somebody that's going to reinforce that unworthiness.
When you talk to people about that and that they've contributed, how do you find they react?
I think because I quite often give an example of how I've overcome a situation, and then ask them, how might you
Yeah.
have contributed? That's the way I handle it.
Yeah. No, and that's what I do as well. I find that if you open yourself up and share with people some of the stuff that's happened to you, vulnerability, stories, they're far more inclined to do this. I mean, I have a friend who, whenever I receive a text, it's, very, not going to say abrupt, but, it to me, it's not conducive to conversation. And I'd be like, well, what do you want to know what I've been up to? I don't want to tell you. And it's a natural human reaction. But when someone starts like, oh, are you, I've been up to this, I've done that, whatever, you're far more likely to respond in the same way, aren't you?
Yeah, you're opening the door. By shining your light, you're allowing other people to shine theirs, in
Yeah.
this context, by sharing your pain and how you've overcome it and how you've accepted responsibility to what you contributed to that situation. You're allowing them to think about, oh, actually, how might I have contributed to my situation or situations that have happened in my past?
I think another thing as well is something that, don't quote me on it, because it's something I'm discovered recently and I don't know that much about just yet. It's called gap thinking. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is, for people who don't know, that we look at where we are now and where we want to be, which seems impossible and too far, and we're a failure basically, as opposed to looking at where we are now and where we've come from. And when you look at where you've come from and what you've achieved in your life, a lot of the time you can't quite believe it, can you?
No, and I quite often say to clients that, you know what, you've got a track record of 100% overcoming all your previous adversities. You'll get through this one.
Yeah.
Because we all have, haven't we?
Yeah. So when you look back on your life, in terms of self-reflection, can you see defining moments, or would you say it was lots of little things that added to the healing and the growth?
Yeah, I can definitely see defining moments. Obviously, one was when I was really contemplating seriously suicide. The other one was, as I touched on, when my daughters were going through puberty, and me thinking they need to know what happened, because I want them to be able to tell me if they
If
ever
something
feel,
happens to them, yeah.
yeah, they might experience something like that, or if something does happened, they could tell me about it, because I didn't feel safe to tell my own parents about what happened to me. So, so those were the main two defining moments. And literally then, subsequently after ending my marriage and ending up in a new long-term relationship, knowing that I can attract, healthy passion in a relationship. And what was it within that changed, that made the difference?
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say would be a pearl of wisdom for anybody listening to this and thinking, oh, I'm not so sure?
I feel, it's understanding really what is your natural core energy to start with. And as I said, for most women in heterosexual relationships, it will be your feminine. And if that is the case, what is it for you that helps you to feel more feminine, that you've not been doing up to now? If you're in a relationship where you haven't currently got that passion, what is it that you're not exuding that you probably used to exude, probably in the early days when you were courting, or in a previous relationship where it was good, that you're not exuding now, through probably current resentments, maybe, around why he should change,
Yeah.
rather than, you starting borrowing. Because women have got the power to change their man, and it isn't by change him, it's by changing us first and foremost, ourselves. And by changing ourselves and getting into our different energy and healthier feminine energy, you'll notice him respond to that in a different way that is what you want.
But I think that the thing as well, potentially, I mean, tell me what you think on that, but I think sometimes we can just be with the wrong person as well.
Yes,
And we've
absolutely.
got to have the balls to admit that to ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. You can. I think a lot of the time, we do stay in relationships, don't we, a lot longer than what we should. And I think that goes for both sexes. And know that really, it's not for us, and it's run its course. But even if it's a toxic relationship, the reason why people stay in it is because it's familiar.
Yeah, yeah, it's what they know,
What feels
comfort in a
familiar
way.
feels comfortable. So even if it's a horrible relationship, people will quite often stay in it just because they're used to it, and it's
Yeah.
what they know.
And it is the fear of the unknown, because the human brain is wired to think the worst. So they probably think, oh, I don't see how you could get any better with somebody else, so I might as well stay there.
And this is why, it's important for the likes of yourself and myself, to educate people that there is a way to make things different, but
Yeah.
there is a way to change our thinking. There is more awareness around learning, around, as we've explained a little bit and touched on a little bit, how we can be more in our feminine energy to attract, a strong masculine male. Because quite often, I hear quite often through, professional women especially, oh, I don't attract, strong masculine men. And it's because they're in their masculine energy. They're not going to attract strong masculine men if they're wearing the trousers, when they go to meet and date people, because they're still, exuding that they're one of the lads type energy. And when men aren't attracted to that, even if you're super intelligent, super successful, they're not attracted to that. And that's why some women think, oh, that they need to be a bimbo or some sort of airhead, but they don't. That's not what it's about at all.
Do you think that you can naturally be more masculine than feminine if you're a woman, and more feminine than masculine? Yeah, if you're a man, but just
Yeah.
through upbringing and stuff like that, and actually don't mind it?
Yeah, I mean, even in heterosexual relationships, you can have, the woman that's more naturally got the masculine dominant energy that's more natural to her state. It's a smaller percentage, and the same in men. But also, you can see it definitely in gay relationships. You can see the effeminate
Yeah.
men in gay relationships, and the more butch type men in a gay relationships, and they will attract each other. And the same in women, you can see the definite butch type lesbian women, can't you, that are obviously more in that masculine energy that is their dominant core energy, and they attract, more feminine energy as their partner. You don't very often see two butch type lesbian women
No, it's
who are in
true.
a relationship, because that's two male energies again, isn't
Yeah.
it? Masculine energies again.
Well, again, we're getting towards the end of our time together. So, what would your parting words be?
My parting words would be to not beat yourself up. If you recognize that you've made some of these mistakes, we've all been there. I can put my hand up to making all of them. But they just know that with this new awareness, you can change things. That it is possible to have a great, healthy, vibrant, alive relationship with lots of passion, intimacy, and fulfillment. It doesn't have to be just in fairy tales. You can attract that, but it's knowing and being given the tools, strategies, and techniques to enable yourself to step into that. And for me, it is about teaching women, how to be in their feminine energy to attract that.
Well, Lyn, thank you so much for your time today. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, and more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.